You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com.
Episode 33, The Paradox.
Welcome to The Paradox with your attending, Dr. Eric Larson. He is a practicing anesthesiologist and clinical assistant professor at Michigan State University College of Human Medicine. Listen in as he takes you behind the scenes of what practicing medicine in today's ever-changing world is like with another doctor. The Paradox is a fun and accidentally informative show for physicians, patients, or anyone who has ever found themselves in a waiting room.
Welcome to The Paradox. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Larson. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you're a first-time listener, please be sure to hit the subscribe button in your favorite podcast player so you don't miss a single episode. There are also plenty in the archives, so go through the titles and find a couple more that you'd like to listen to. And please, I encourage you, and I appreciate those who already have, to share the episode with your friends and colleagues if you find something that you think would be something of interest to them. Today we're going to be delving a little bit away from our usual topics. And again, I feel like I say this almost every episode now as we sort of branch out in what we discuss and related to medicine. But today we're going to be talking about personal finance. We're going to be talking about the FIRE movement. And this has nothing to do with firearms or wildfires, but this has to do with finance and personal finance for physicians, professionals, and even people who are not professionals, so to speak, because we're just talking about ways of achieving financial independence and retiring early. My guest today is the physician on fire, Dr. Leif Dahleen, who is an anesthesiologist and just about ready to retire. And I did not ask him in the episode, but I think he's not quite hit 50 yet. And he worked briefly for my anesthesia group, although we only met once in person because he was working in a different location. But anyway, great discussion. And I think you'll learn a lot, whether you are a high-income earner, someone who in the middle, or someone even on the low end, because I think the principles here are ones that how much you have to save for retirement is entirely dependent on how much you need to spend in your retirement. But we'll get into that discussion during the show. Since I've come back from the vacation, I've been off by my episode numbers. I apologize, not that probably anyone noticed in the last episode, but this is actually episode 33, which you know since you see it on your podcast player, but I was unaware and thought I was episode 32. I think that's in large part from not paying my staff enough, or actually even having a staff. So anyway, not that, it probably bothers anybody at all, except me in trying to organize my episodes and keep track of things. The show notes will be at theparadox.com/033. And there you can find links to everything the Physician on Fire has written, well, to his website anyway, in which case you can get access to everything. He does send out a newsletter, or I guess an email blast every Sunday, which is the best of the web from physician finance and really the FIRE movement, which again, I don't want to specifically point out that it's just for physicians, it's for anybody. In our discussion, we're going to go over the reasons you want to achieve financial independence, the reason one would want to retire early, and even how to fend off some of those criticisms one might get from your colleagues or family members or just the lay public, the average person up the street who wonders why you could do all that training and then you want to walk away at such a young age. Also, you can support the show financially, which would be much appreciated. And again, if Jeff Bezos is out there, I have really no limits in how much you can give per month. But I only ask that you join one of the three tiers, either the $2, $8, or $25 a month tiers of patrons at patreon.com/paradox. The money will just be used for the promotion and the production of the show, not for my personal enrichment. And now that I think of it as the recording of the show, there's just been announced that Jeff Bezos is probably going to be in the midst of a divorce and lose half his wealth. So I think the likelihood of any of it finding its way to the Paradox is probably substantially smaller than it was even a couple weeks ago. But anyway, on to the show with Dr. Leif Dahleen, the physician on fire. Enjoy. Welcome here with my new friend, Dr. Leif Dahleen. This is Eric Larson, and this is The Paradox. And today we're going to be talking about something totally different than what we've discussed in the past. We're going to be talking about money. Well, I guess we've talked about money lots of times, but today we're going to be talking about personal finances. And Dr. Dahleen is part of the FIRE movement. He's an anesthesiologist practiced briefly for our group here in Michigan. He's now currently in Minnesota. But he has been, I don't know, the forefront's probably the wrong word, but sort of a proponent of the FIRE movement. So we're going to talk about that and about how you can be a part of that, whether or not you're a physician. But certainly this is going to focus a little bit on physicians because we both are. And so, Dr. Dahleen, first of all, thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you for inviting me, and you can call me Leif.
Leif, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can call me Eric too. Since we're professional colleagues, we can use the first name.
Indeed.
Only med students have to call me. But so why don't you discuss briefly what FIRE is, and then just kind of go into how you, I guess, stumbled into it and joined the movement.
Sure, right. In this case, we're talking about an acronym, not the burning hot orange flame. So financial independence, retire early. And I put the emphasis on the first two words, the financial independence piece. And that basically means that you're in a position financially where work is optional. And that obviously gives you the option to retire early. And that's based on having a sizable enough set of assets, your portfolio, or in some cases, maybe rental properties and other things, but that kick off enough money for you to live on. And that's the very basic, 37,000 foot view of what it means to have financial independence. And that's what the FIRE movement is about, getting to a point where you can make that choice of if you work, how you work, when you work, etc.
Right. So it's almost an emphasis really on the independence part, right? So that you have the options to kind of do whatever you want to do, wherever you want, and you live life more on, I guess, on your terms than dependent on someone else's and you're not dependent on that income specifically, right?
Right. So once income becomes optional, then you have just a whole different world of opportunity. And you also have some leverage that you didn't have before. If there are certain aspects of the job that you don't like, but you want to continue in your profession, well, you got the power to walk away. And that actually can be really, really powerful.
Yeah, I would say, personally speaking, as we paid off our mortgage and got out of all of our student debt, that alone feels... It's surprising that even if your loans are not that much, to not have to make loan payments of some sort, it is an amazing feeling. I know you listen to Dave Ramsey talk about it or something like that, but it is really, you don't realize there's a weight on your shoulders, I guess, that there's this obligation to that you've got a financial obligation to somebody, and suddenly if that's gone, it is very liberating. And,
it is. And then your paychecks look bigger. And so you want to be careful not to just say, oh, more money to spend. And then all of a sudden you're back to where you were in some ways, although you're still debt free. But yeah, we did the same thing. We have no mortgage, paid off student loans, which for me weren't that big. I went to state schools and had scholarships and all that. But it was like $60,000 or something like that. And that was, again, 15 years ago when I finished school. 16 now. 17. Geez, time flies. Yeah. And the other
look in the mirror.
Yes, Happy New Year. You also can stop paying for things like term life insurance and disability insurance, because again, those are there to protect you and your family if you can no longer work. But if you can afford to no longer work, then those insurances are redundant. So, I stopped spending $300 some a month on my disability policy and another $30 or $50 a month on that term life insurance once I realized that we were financially independent. So, yeah, it's like the paychecks keep getting bigger and bigger once you don't need them, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, and I think the important thing to mention too is, we're talking about high income people as physicians, but it really would apply to anybody. I mean, I think probably it's all a mathematical question, right? As far as how much you require.
Yeah. Yep. How much
to
spend
live,
or
right?
anticipate spending each year, and then you multiply that. And the common number that's probably talked about most is a 4% withdrawal rate. So living on 4% of your portfolio each year, in which case you need to have 25 times your annual spending saved up. And the math works out. You just divide the number 100 by the withdrawal rate, and that's the number of years you need to save. Now, to be a little more conservative, to have a bigger cushion, to plan on a especially long retirement, which I intend to do, I think it's prudent to maybe rely on a lower withdrawal rate. If you use like 3.3%, you need it about 30 times. If you want to go as low as 3% of a withdrawal rate of how much you're going to actually spend of that portfolio, then you're looking at 33 times. So yeah, let's say you spend $100,000 a year, and maybe that's, for a lot of doctors doesn't sound like much, but once you don't have a mortgage, once you're, a lot of those one-time expenses are taken care of, you're no longer paying down student loans, et cetera, you can live pretty well for $100,000 a year. Most families don't bring that home, at all. So then the 25X turns into 2.5 million, the 33X is 3.3. And, there's also, like I mentioned, you can approach it from a cash flow standpoint. Some people, like my friend Passive Income MD, Peter Kim, he is a proponent of looking at your monthly cash flow. And some of that might come from rental properties, as I mentioned, businesses, et cetera. The term passive is problematic sometimes because a lot of that, business and real estate income is semi-passive to active, but basically as long as you have money coming in reliably, that can cover your monthly expenses, and then some. You can consider yourself to be financially independent from that aspect too.
So that's the financial independence part. Let's discuss the retirement early. And so I think traditionally people think 65 is when you retire. So that'd be sort of standard retirement age, or 67 and a half, or whatever it's designated by Social Security. So the second half of the FIRE acronym suggests retirement early. So what are people talking about? And I guess what's your motivation for that?
So I think this whole FIRE movement, I became aware of it by reading about a guy who goes by Mr. Money Mustache, Pete Adeney out in Colorado. He is a guy that retired from a software engineering job at age 30. And he and his wife raised their kid, and he did a little bit of stuff on the side, some construction projects and whatnot, but essentially considered himself retired with 25 times his quite low annual spending already saved up. So yeah, like you mentioned, it can be a viable option for people of lower incomes, but obviously it helps to have more income, makes it easier. I talk about living on half of your take-home pay, and if you can do that, if you can, for every dollar you spend, save and invest $1, you'll be financially independent, going from broke in about 15 years, give or take, depending on market returns. And so, it is a viable option. The white coat investor likes to say you're never more than about 10 years away from financial independence. If you can learn to sock away, in that case, it would be maybe 65% of your take-home pay. What's the motivation? That was the other question.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So
why are you doing this?
It was interesting. I didn't envision, if you told me 5 years ago that I would be on the cusp of retiring and I'd have this website where I talk about it and all that, I wouldn't believe it. It doesn't sound like me. I thought I'd work at least until, I was an empty nester, which I think I'll be about 53 at that point. So that's 10 years away. I've got an 8-year-old at home and a 10-year-old boy. And so like I said, I found this Mr. Money Mustache. I read a lot of his site because it was really intriguing. At the time, I was also studying for the maintenance of certification exam that was supposed to be good for 10 years, and I was thinking, well, we'll have to do this again in 10 more years. I'm going to go back and find that mustache thing, read more about that. And I did. And then I learned about the math behind it. And I was like, I know we crossed the, 7-figure point in our portfolio a while ago. And I ran the numbers, added up, what we had, looked at about what we spent. And sure enough, I could call ourselves financially independent, which I thought was amazing. I was like, well, obviously not going to quit my job right now, but it's really something to think about. Like, what do I want the next 15, 20 years to look like, and our kids at that time this was 3 or 4 years ago. So they were like maybe, 4 and 6 years old. So my wife and I started talking and kind of came up with about a 5-year plan. And thought we'd get them through grade school, elementary school for the most part here. And then we could kind of go wherever, do whatever. So we talk about some big adventures, traveling with our kids around the world and spending summers, close to family in northern Michigan. And I'll keep my license. I don't want to 6 to 12 months after my last day of work here, which is going to be in August of 2019. I don't want to have this,
Wow.
I've made a huge mistake, kind of feeling. And so I'll make sure I can still work if I want to with an active license and ACLS and all that good stuff. Maybe I'd even come back to Grand Rapids and visit you guys, but I'm not making any plans right now. Just keep the door open. Yeah.
So, I mean, part of it is just the option of doing what you want, right? So if you're enjoying your job, enjoying what you're doing, you have, I think Scott Adams has talked about it, at least the point where he can make bad financial decisions in his sense that he can lose speaking engagements or book offers by being controversial or whatever on Twitter and things. So it's just having that independence and the options to kind of do what you want to do.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's sort of what you're looking for, so that you have the FU money, so to speak.
That's what people call it, right? Yeah.
Right.
That leverage I mentioned. Uh-huh.
Right. And so one question people ask, and if we're just going to stick with physicians just for the time being right now.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, and I say this as policymakers or a lot of the lay public will say, well, how can you go to medical school? You're going through school. Medical school is 4 years. You're done at 26. You do residency 3 to 5, 6 years. You're done in your mid-30s, and now you're retiring at age 44. The society invested in you. There's been and there's so many people who need medical care. How can you just walk away?
Yeah, there's definitely a slippery slope there. Is there a set amount that's enough? I don't know. I mean, my wife went to public schools all the way from kindergarten through college, and then got her master's degree at another one, and she hasn't worked really, professionally in her profession as a dietitian at all. I don't see people, coming down on her for choosing to be a stay-at-home mom, but in some ways you can make a similar argument there. And should we be working? Should we work every weekend, right? I mean, we have this ability to do these amazing things. Should we be working more? Is 1 decade enough? Is 2 enough? I know that in residency that, the residency program was supported with Medicare dollars, but I don't feel like, working 60 to 80 hours a week for about $10 an hour was really well subsidized. I think the department was subsidized, but I think it would have cost them a heck of a lot more to hire a CRNA to do the same work. So yeah, I don't feel like I was really on the government dole at that point. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, on some level, we're all in the government dole. Everybody in this country, there's so much money sloshing around, right?
Great.
So you can't really make that argument, I think.
Well, shoot, I've paid 6 figures in income taxes pretty much every year for 12, 13 years. So I think I'm closing in on something like $2 million paid back if you factor in property taxes, sales tax, income tax, everything else. So yeah, I feel like whatever debt I might have had has probably been paid back several times over. Another argument is the free care that we give. We have a lot of self-pay, no-pay patients that we take care of. And, so I'm sure there have been hundreds of those I've done too.
Sure. And to that answer, I'd also add, I'm not sure about your medical school. Where did you go to medical school, actually?
University of Minnesota.
Okay. So
undergrad too.
I got the impression I knew you were Midwest somewhere because I went to Iowa. So
yeah,
but I'm sure same thing in the sense that there were people there who were, what's the term was non-traditional students. Mm-hmm. They weren't one straight out of college, right? So we had a couple who had a previous career.
Yeah, we had a grandfather in my
group,
class.
Right? Yeah. And so these are people who, and I remember thinking at the time, like, why are you getting into this? You're only going to be able to work for like 10 years or something.
Yeah.
And then but then, that's kind of what you're doing. You're just doing the reverse end.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think anyone begrudged that person or the state. And, you could argue maybe it's not a good subsidy by the state to sort of help to subsidize medical education to train someone who's going to only work for 10, 12 years or something. I don't know. I mean, those are probably impossible calculations.
You're going to have people that don't work in the profession at all. I know someone who finished residency and then was a stay-at-home mom after that.
Yeah.
And I don't begrudge her whatsoever.
No.
You're going to have people that work till they're 80, and it's going to be everywhere in between. So
sure. And people pass away unexpectedly. There are, people commit suicide, especially physician ranks. I mean, there's a high suicide rate within physicians, and there's a lot of money invested in that. And so I think, I don't begrudge anybody, because I also don't think I owe anybody anything in some respects, except my obligations to my family.
Interesting, because people say, well, but you help people. And I say, yeah, I do, 3 or 4 at a time. That's how many I can medically direct in the operating rooms. But doing this thing with the website, and I'm talking about personal finance and investing and all these other things. And I get some great emails from people that were just really inspired and motivated and making positive changes in their lives. I reach thousands of people every day and help them in some way with their personal finances. So I feel like I'm doing more good in a way with this other career. And I have a hard time now really saying that I'm retiring, because I do spend a lot of time communicating with people and writing and doing the whole blog thing with physicianonfire.com. So I have that, but that doesn't necessarily apply to other people that choose to retire. If they just want to retire to travel the world, that's great. More power to them.
Right. I mean, I think in general, people are unlikely to retire. I think retirement is probably a misnomer, right?
Yeah.
I think it suggests idleness, and I think there are people maybe when they hit 90 aren't able to really produce much. But if you're 50, you're probably doing something or contributing to society, or you're helping your kids watch your grandchildren, or there's probably something you're doing that is of some sort of benefit to somebody. And so it's, especially if you're a highly trained person, I think it's pretty unlikely that you're just going to be golfing 36, holes of golf every day.
Yep. Yeah. A lot of people have that the word retirement. It just conjures up images of beaches or golf clubs or umbrella and the little colorful drink. But that's not necessarily what most, younger people who leave their primary, quote unquote 9 to 5. Ours is more like a 6 to 6, and that's 24 hours, not 12. But we do something productive, and that's my nature. Like I always want to be somehow productive, doing something. So my wife is glad I have this website, because she's like, you would find something else. You would be doing something if you weren't doing anesthesia. So, I do look forward to having just more family time and these. I've been working part-time now, actually, for about a year, almost a year and a half. And I can take 3-week chunks of time off. And we've spent time traveling as a family. Went to Mexico for 3 weeks one time, went to Hawaii for a few weeks, went to Florida for a couple of weeks. We've traveled to Europe together, although I didn't have the big chunk of time then. That was about 6 months before I started this new part-time schedule. But yes, I just kind of want to stretch that out, go kind of live in place rather than vacation somewhere and try to pack everything into 6 or 7 days like we usually do. So, yeah.
So let's imagine you're talking to someone who is either just entering or just finished completing their residency, or maybe even entering a residency, or let's talk about someone who's just finishing law school or something like that, a professional. What would you say are the biggest, if you're thinking, maybe I want this to be an option. I want to have the ability to reach financial independence. I'm 25, 30 years old. What are the biggest mistakes, and what are the things I want to try and avoid doing right now as I'm going out into life?
Sure. Well, I think the biggest, it's you have to have that savings, right? You really do need to save a substantial portion of what you earn. And so that means you want to avoid doing what probably most of your colleagues will be doing, which are, buying or leasing luxury automobiles, living in the nicest neighborhood that you can find, in the more expensive homes that you can get loan for. So it really just comes down to finding a comfortable lifestyle in which you're happy, but still able to save. Like I said, if you can save $1 for every dollar you spend, you're going to be in great shape.
And so what would you, so the biggest thing is to not, so
that lifestyle
cars,
inflation, right? Don't succumb to, quote unquote, keeping up with the Joneses. I know it's a tired phrase, but you don't want to do that.
Well, I always joke that no matter how big a bucket you get, you can always put a bigger hole in the bottom of it.
Yeah.
And I will see, it is striking to me the number of colleagues I have who are late in their career who can't miss a paycheck.
Yeah.
Like they get sick or something, they need advances. I'm like, I can't imagine being 60 some years old.
Yeah.
And because I know what the incomes are, and I don't know where the money goes, but I mean, you can see how you can easily spend all kinds of money if you're
boats and cabins, and I have both, but they're modest. It's surprising, but you're right. People don't want to be frugal necessarily, and they say, well, just work on the income side. You can make more income, but like you said, you can always outspend any income. It's like Johnny Depp spending $200 million a year. There's really no limit as to what you can spend. And so working on the income side only helps if you don't spend up to that income. So when you work on the frugality side and learn to spend a portion of your income, you can get ahead quicker. And the other benefit of finding a good, comfortable lifestyle with a, let's say, moderate to moderately high level of spending in the maybe low six-figure range, we'll just say 100,000 a year, because that's really easy math, then your target number to be financially independent is lower. If you're spending $200,000 a year, now you need at least $5 million to be considered financially independent, based on that 4% withdrawal rate we mentioned earlier. But if you're living on 100,000 a year, now you need 2.5 million, maybe to 3 million. And if you're living on, let's say, 60,000 a year, well, then it's 1.5 million. So the math works out in your favor if you can find a way to not, quote unquote, need the luxury cars. And you can have one. You just have to factor that in and realize you're going to need more money and spend more time getting there. But it's all about the math. And I'm not saying that there are certain things you can't have. There's one gal named Paula Pant who has a pretty popular podcast called Afford Anything, and her tagline is you can't afford everything, but you can afford it. No, I said that totally wrong. You can afford anything, you can't afford everything.
What would you say people should target for retirement age? Because if you want to retire, you say 55 is a reasonable, or would you not even have an age?
That's reasonably early. I didn't think I would ever want to retire early. I like my job, I think. Mm-hmm. I mean, for what we do and the compensation we get, it's pretty cool, Yeah,
I agree.
But I like my work. I like my days off, I guess, more than my work days typically, and especially with this, busy growing family and time flying by, and my kids are halfway to being out of the house already, and it seems like we're just holding them as babies. Yeah. So as far as what date you target, I don't know if I would necessarily do that, because you're probably not going to be thinking about, well, I'm just starting my career. How soon can I get out? That's a terrible attitude. And I kind of feel bad for people that discover this whole FIRE movement when they're just getting started, in a way, because if they decide that's what they really want, then that makes the 10, 15, or 20 years it takes to get there, a bit more of a slog maybe. But, I'd focus on that, what it takes to become financially independent, because you as a person will change. Your job very likely will change. So even if you're super happy doing exactly what you're doing, you're doing the thing you trained for that you love, and this is what you wanted, and you still want to get to a point where you have options, and you want to get there before you're 65 or 70. So I'm going to push that live on half again and say, if you're broke and you're 32 years old, 15 to 20 years. So by age 50, you should be in a position of financial independence.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I would say, speaking personally, when it comes to my partners who have anxiety over getting paychecks and later in their career, we were not in that position. I wouldn't say we're frugal. I tend to be kind of cheap for myself, but we have nice stuff. But we had a nice financial cushion, as regular listeners of the show would know. My son passed away in August.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so sorry about that.
Yeah, thank you. And so that's, obviously it can't be more unexpected than that.
No kidding.
But my wife stopped working. I stopped working for a while, and to not worry about not working, mm-hmm. and to just say, we're going to take time till we are okay to get back to work, or to where maybe that's helpful to go back and, whatever, to not have any anxiety about that was very comforting in itself, to not worry that that you have to go back in a week because
right. And
you just have to earn some money
yourself in the grieving process. I understand. And you're seeing now with the government shutdown, which is in the midst of while we're recording, there are a lot of people that are, they're starting GoFundMes and they're eating ramen and they don't have an emergency fund, even a few weeks worth of, expenses saved up. So, a minimum, the first thing you want to do is just get that few months worth of what you spend set aside as your emergency fund. I guess that's a stepping stone to, making your way towards financial independence.
So you started Physician on Fire, and then the website is onfire.com, or is it physicianonfire.com?
You can POfire.com gets you there, or if you want to type it all out, physicianonfire.com. Yeah.
You pay for both domain names. You lay down $40.
$12 to Google. Yeah.
And you started that a couple years ago. How has that process been? From a standpoint of what sort of personal enjoyment have you gotten out of it? What sort of
it's
financial and monetization have you gotten out of it?
I've gotten a lot more out of it than I ever would have imagined. Like I said, I started reading Mr. Money Mustache. I found a few other fire blogs, and I found the White Coat Investor shortly thereafter. And I really got into this stuff. I started learning a lot. I had been on the Bogleheads website, which is kind of like a Vanguard fanboy forum, but you learn a ton. There's some really, really intelligent conversations going on there. But yeah, after I read the White Coat Investor, a lot of his stuff, I thought, I think there's room for another voice here talking. He had an article that said 14 reasons not to retire early. I was like, yeah, but I could almost refute each and every one of these or have a good counter argument. And I didn't have much experience writing, but when I occasionally did, usually like to complain about some kind of injustice at work or whatever. But I feel I could put words together well enough to make a point. And so I just started reading how to start a blog, and then I started a blog. And it's been just over 3 years now, and we've had almost 5 million page views on the site.
Wow.
Yeah, about half those in the last year. So it's a popular topic. It's a range of topics that I talk about, but it's been awesome. I've met a ton of people. As you might know, actually kind of partnered with the White Coat Investor. So he and Passive Income MD and I are now 3 members of the White Coat Investor Network, and we do some cross promotion and publish each other's classic posts and collaborate in some other ways with this business, and that's just a couple people. But I've been to different meetups with readers. I've been to conference of bloggers. I've been to some other things. I've made a lot of friends in real life, that are people I never would have had a chance to meet if not for doing this. So I'm also using the site to earn some money, which is interesting. And I am donating half of those profits. So I've been building up this donor advised fund that we'll be able to give from over a lifetime. And we've got, one of my goals prior to retiring, because I do have a bit of guilt associated with stepping away from this profession, but to build up a good sized donor fund that we can give from. So that's at about 10% of what our nest egg is. So for every $10 you spend, we can donate $1 and do that forever too. So that's pretty fun. And I have a feeling we're going to be donating a lot more than I anticipated, because the website is much more popular than I thought it could ever be.
That's really cool. And so obviously when you retire, you're going to continue working on the website and the blog, right?
Retired, not retired. It's very different.
Retired from your primary profession, perhaps, I guess is the way.
Yeah, and again, it wasn't necessarily what I anticipated, but I wouldn't stop doing this. At this point, it'd be silly. And I can do it from anywhere in the world, and I can step away from it without consequence. So, yeah.
I've and I would echo that, and that I started this podcast as a way of, I had 3 episodes in my mind, and we're on episode 32 right now. So show notes for this and links to your website will be at theparadox.com/032. Notice I have the 0, so I'm ambitious that I'm going to hit.
That's
at some
good.
point.
That's good planning.
I don't, however, plan hitting 4 digits, but I think it will exceed my lifetime. But this podcast has been the message I've gotten from people have been pretty profound, where people's lives have changed and they've refocused what they're going to do for their career. Mm-hmm. I've had this, as you said, just the people you meet. I get free books, which is kind of nice. But the people you meet and through conversation and the new acquaintances you make, it's really a neat thing, because with anybody, you're sort of limited. Your social circle is limited to what your social circle is. It's people within your proximity, perhaps within your profession. And then whenever you branch out into something new, you have the ability to meet and network with new people, which I've never liked the term networking, because it always sounds like a sales sort of kind of slimy, kind of you're working people, Right. But I guess the way it should be viewed is that it's more of a way of just branching out and just finding new people and new interests, and that's probably a better way of looking at networking. But I think that's because I'm an introvert, and so I'm maybe naturally suspicious of
I'm kind of the same way.
Yeah, I find most people who do this sort of thing tend to be fairly introverted, which I've always found kind of interesting. But it's easy for me to talk into a microphone because I'm not, have to deal with 20 people in a crowded cocktail party or something.
Right.
So you're retiring in August.
Yep.
What's your plan for the end of the year? I mean, I imagine you have some sort of idea. You're going to go on trips. Your kids are in school, so they're probably you're not going to go away for long periods of time.
Yeah.
Or do you just pull them out?
Our kids have been in public school, and our school has been very generous in letting us, take like 10 weeks away per year in chunks of 3 weeks at a time.
Truants.
So we've been very fortunate there. But we are going to start homeschooling next fall, and or road schooling, as we call it, wherever we are in the nation or the world. But I wanted to have some kind of grand plan for the first few months, but we're going to be building a house in northern Michigan on a lake up there, and we'll probably want to be around for that. So at least for part of it.
Yeah, right.
We're going to break ground this spring and probably be making a lot of decisions on tile and carpet and hardwood and whatnot and all that. So so we're just going to kind of get comfortable with the homeschooling thing. We'll be staying at our cabin up there, which is like an hour away from the building site, and then I think we'll probably take a trip. We may have an RV that we might park on the site where we're building too, and we may take that on the road for a while. But given the situation with the house building, we don't want to go off to New Zealand for 6 months, which is something we might have done if not for that. So. Yep, that's
come back to a purple house.
Right.
So let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about people who are not as high income earners. So the process is still the same, right? I mean, because presumably you're spending less and you're living on less, so the amount that you need to retire is less.
Right.
So it really doesn't change things in some sense, right?
Right. I think if you are if you're only earning, let's say, minimum wage, you're just not going to be able to live on half of minimum wage, right? That's not an option. If you're let's say a kind of, more median income, I think is in the 60, 70,000 range for a household,
Right.
And you're going to pay some taxes, and that you're probably going to struggle to live on half of that income, but maybe you can save 25 to 35%. And then you can be financially independent in, maybe 25 years. Or, like I said, you can work on that income side, and that will work to your benefit as long as you don't take that income and spend it and use it to upgrade your lifestyle. So, but it is all about percentages. There's a table that you can find. Several people have published it, just the number of years that you'll have to work to be financially independent based on your savings rate. And if it's 90%, it's like 3 years, because that's 27 years worth of spending that you just set aside. You do need a good savings rate.
And so as far as savings, we're talking about traditional savings, right?
So not necessarily savings account, but basically how much you don't spend. So,
but we're talking about I guess what I meant is you're talking about investing,
exactly.
Or whether it's index funds or
probably heavy stocks for the most part. You're going to be invested for the long haul. So I'm about 90% stock, 10% bond.
So let's say the market takes a dramatic downturn this year. No, it hasn't. I've read a number of sites where they're saying when you look at the valuation, blah blah blah, they expected Dow to go down. Let's say the S&P to hit maybe 1,200 or 1,400, and right now it's at 2,500.
There's always the doom.
There's always a perma bear, right? But let's say that happens, which is not impossible, because if you look at traditionally some large cyclical markets that could go down that far.
We've had that too. Even in my investing, time, 2000 and 2008, 2009. So it can happen.
But does that change your calendar this year if that would happen?
No, it doesn't change the calendar for me for a couple of reasons. Number one, the 4% withdrawal rate is based upon kind of the worst case scenarios in the past. Mm-hmm. So it looks at, there are a couple academic studies, one from William Bengen, I think in like 92 or 93, and then the Trinity study is often mentioned in that was a year or two later. So they looked at these different time periods going all the way back to before the Great Depression. And, if you retired at the worst time in history, how long would your money have lasted? And 97 or 98% of the time, your money lasted 30 years or more if you abided by initial 4% withdrawal, and then you increase that dollar value with inflation each year. Now, what would I do differently if the market lost half its value? We wouldn't go to New Zealand for sure, not that we are planning, but maybe we'd go to Mexico or Central America for 3 to 6 months and spend maybe $1,000 or $1,500 a month. Just you don't want to draw from your portfolio too much when the market is down. You only lose money when you sell low. It also helps to have a bit of a cushion, and that could be a cash cushion. So maybe you just have a couple of years of your spending set aside in a money market or a savings account, and that way you won't have to sell any stock or bond funds when they're low, as long as everything in the markets recover within a couple of years. Another thing I have is a cushion with income from this other online venture that I have. So we've got some different things. Like I said, I'll still keep my license, credentials, etc., so that I could go back and do anesthesia work if I chose to. But I have written an article that says, a bear market can't really take away your financial independence, because once you hit that, say 25x or 30x, you've already accounted for the fact that the market could drop, and maybe you only have 18x after that. But now valuations are lower after that huge drop, and PE ratios are maybe 12 or 14 instead of 30. And
right.
Then the outlook going forward is very bright. So now you have 18x, but you can expect over the next couple decades maybe above average returns or better, certainly than what you could have expected before the big drop. So that's just kind of how I think about that thing.
So if people want to find more about you, I mean, obviously physicianonfire.com or POF.
POfire.com.
POfire, sorry, POfire.com. What other, when you talked about the collaboration with these other fire commentators, what sort of things are you doing with those guys?
Well, the main two that I am working with online are the White Coat Investor, whitecoatinvestor.com, and Passive Income MD, same thing, passiveincomemd.com. So every Saturday we publish something that the other has written, and we share our things on social media. So we're pretty active on Twitter, and I now have Instagram, which is mostly just curling pics or brewery stuff. But and then Facebook, I have a presence on Facebook, and on all of those, it's just Physician on Fire at the end of the URL. And I've got a Facebook group, Physicians on Fire, so it's plural, and that's for docs to join. And we have a lot of good discussions there. People ask questions, and 10 or 20 people offer help, so that's really cool. So I'm active online, to say the least.
Do you and how do you promote your website?
A few different ways. You can leave comments on other blog posts that are in the same niche. So I think that's how Dr. Jim Dahleen, the White Coat Investor, found me, was through some comments I left on his articles. I also started getting active on Twitter and putting my articles on there for people to find. I reached out to Kevin MD, got a guest post on his site fairly early on. So you just need to be seen. If you create something amazing, but it's just at this one website, this address that no one's going to find, well, no one's going to read it. So you do spend a lot of time just helping people find you. I spend quite a bit of time on forums as well. There's the Bogleheads that I mentioned. White Coat Investor also started a forum right about the time I started my site. So just being active there and having that username, that tag, Physician on Fire. And you don't want to self-promote, oh, I wrote a blog post about this, constantly, especially early on when people haven't heard of you. But just show that you're knowledgeable and help people. And then eventually they'll, oh, he has a website too. And then go from there. Yeah.
Do you pay for advertising as well?
I do not.
Okay.
I haven't. I may do some Facebook ads. And I guess that can be profitable from what I hear, depending on where you send them on your site, but
I guess.
I don't know. That's beyond where I'm at this point.
I have a Patreon account that I have linked to with the show, and I have a number of very generous patrons who help support the show and cover costs, and
cool.
And which fortunately is very little. So aside from the time and it goes into stuff. But
the startup costs for these things are a few $100s maybe for equipment, hosting, whatever. It's not
right. Exactly. But the promotion part is very, very challenging. I've tried ads, and I'm not sure exactly the best way. Probably, like you said, being active in social media and getting on other shows or doing other things. That's how you promote yourself. That's how you get your name out there and people discover you. Do you have an email list as well that you maintain?
I do. It's pretty easy to subscribe. You'll see subscription in my sidebar, and then in a lot of my more popular posts, I have them there. So I just deleted 500 some cold subscribers who never open emails. Maybe it goes to the spam box. I'm not sure, but there's something 6,000 some subscribers that get notices when I have a new post, or some of them are on a weekly digest list. So if they don't want to get 4 posts, 4 emails a week from me, they just get one that links to everything that I've published over the last week.
And then finally, how many hours a week would you say you devote to your Physician on Fire persona?
Too many.
I'm burning an hour right now.
Right. Yeah. Here's one. It's tough to say. I'm pretty scatterbrained when I'm online, so I'll have 18 tabs open them, and maybe 3 of them are my personal email and ESPN and the news, and then I'll have a bunch of stuff that I'm reading, and I don't know how to track it. I mean, if I'm reading 20 blog posts and finding stuff to share for my Sunday best roundup series, I guess that's working on the site. Although what I'm doing is reading and learning and being entertained, so it's. But to give you a number, I don't know. It's 30 or more, I would say, hours per week that I'm on the computer. How much that I can
it's
directly ascribe to the site work it's a little bit nebulous.
It's funny because I have people ask me how long I take on the podcast. I say, well, it takes interviews about an hour, take about an hour to edit or so, and then it's about an hour to sort of get the post up, and so it's a couple hours a week. But that doesn't include all the times you're out trying to track someone down, sending emails or interviews, and maybe reading a book that's related to the interview, reading like I read a bunch of your blog posts to try to get a feel for the movement. And those are those hours. But again, like you said, I'm learning as much and finding personal enjoyment out of that. So it's not really, I guess, work, or not even related technically to the show as much as it is sort of just personal education.
It's hard to describe a number. And I said, and I'll be retired, but I'll still be working and I'll still be making money, but it's a very, very different kind of work. The stress is non-existent pretty much. So.
Right. And probably it's fair to say that the stress would be significant if you were reliant on that income.
Oh yeah, right. And
so that's the difference.
Many conversions on, no.
Yeah, you're working for fun, really, and which
it's still fun to make money though. I'm not gonna lie, like, or just to get page views. Like I used to get really excited, like it's like fantasy football. Like you want your guys to score. You really want your team guys to score, and so you can have a high score. But why? It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. Yeah, I followed download numbers for a long time. I mean, occasionally check in and stuff to see which episodes and the numbers, but it can also drive you mad because you're trying to figure out what went wrong, or why is this episode not as popular as I thought it would be, and things like that. So.
Yeah, I've learned that people don't like to hear or read about like charitable giving, or like even I did a mission
unless
trip.
It's to them.
I wrote up like a 4,000 word post on the mission trip in Honduras, and barely anybody read it. But then a few days later, I published like the 7 Habits of the Wealthy from Passive Income MD, and everybody wants to know about that. Okay.
Probably should have done the 7 Habits of Mission work or something like that. It's probably
list. I don't know. I've read quite a bit on charitable giving, and those posts never perform. I don't care because, like I said, I don't need the views. I don't need the income, and I do believe in trying to inspire people to give generously. So I keep.
Well, it's as much for you as it is for anyone else, and quite possibly those are more impactful. I mean, you may only get a tenth as many views, but perhaps those affect people more than the others.
No, you're right, and I
may change.
Like I said, I've written about this, donor advised fund that we use, and I've had, I would say, I don't know if dozens, but more than a dozen people say they've started a donor advised fund with 6 figures of their own that is now given to the fund and will be given to charity from there. So, it's pretty cool.
Well, I don't want to take up more of your time. I really appreciate it, and we'll absolutely have to try and get in touch when you come back to Michigan.
Yeah, for sure.
You've got a place in northern Michigan as well.
Yeah, we did meet briefly about 6-7 years ago when I was doing locums there, and but it would be fun to sit down, have a little more time to chat.
Maybe we'll have to collaborate some other way because who knows?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
well,
I love what you're
again.
doing there too. Not only with the podcast, but I know you've been really active in sort of the political side of things.
Right.
Working against MLC and some of the title creep and other things going on with physicians. So I applaud your efforts there as well.
Well, I appreciate that. And that is, unfortunately, that is somewhat of a bigger passion of mine. That's why I actually started the podcast, in order to sort of get those things out that are going on, because I think those are a bigger threat. And so that's why I did. It's not for this sort of thing. Although since I've started the podcast, I found there's so many other things that are interesting that are going on in medicine, whether peripherally or directly, that I don't know. I mean, it's been a great learning experience, and I guess it's one of the things that keeps the Alzheimer's away.
Yeah,
doing new things. So, So thanks again. I appreciate it.
You bet. Yeah. Thanks for the invite. It's good to talk to you.
Thanks for listening to The Paradox. If you like what the doc is doing, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher. And share the show with your friends. Become a supporting listener to get access to special bonuses at patreon.com/theparadox. Show notes can be found at theparadox.com.